Hey everybody, this is Tony and I'm here today with a special guest, none other than the man himself with the, most amazing pen game and singer, songwriter, producer, Mr. Gordon Chambers. How you doing today?
Good, thank you.
All right, I'm glad to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Now, of course, you have been a part of most of our lifetimes through music. If it hasn't been through writing, it's been through producing, or if not, being a singer yourself.
Mm.
And I know during the 90s is heavily, you know, influenced in your work, and you were a part of some of the biggest songs in the 90s, matter of fact. I know at one point you worked for Essence Magazine, though, before you got into songwriting full time. So
Yes.
tell me how you got to that point, and at what point did you switch to songwriting fully?
How did I get to Essence? I went to college, and while I was in college, I did a lot of writing for campus newspapers and magazines and periodicals. And it was just a hobby that one of my friends who was on campus, who was a college student, but he was already writing for like magazines, like newspapers called the Village Voice.
Okay.
He would always run his articles by me. Even though I wrote articles also, he'd be like, read this before I put this out, tell me your thoughts. So he thought I had natural editorial vision and skills. So he sort of put the bug in my ear. And I worked at his newspaper, the Village Voice. He got me an internship one summer. And then went out of college, I just applied for a job at Essence and cold called them, just applied for the job and ended up getting the job
Mhm.
and ended up getting promoted to entertainment editor 2 years later. I wanted to work in something that felt more connected to my ultimate dream of being a music professional.
Okay.
So I just felt like media was connected to entertainment, was connected to the industry. That had always been the childhood goal. I'd been writing songs since I was a kid and grew up in a town, Teaneck, New Jersey, where the Isley Brothers were neighbors and Millie Jackson and Kool and the Gang. So I had a fascination and a pursuit of music even through childhood, and working at Essence, and then especially getting promoted to entertainment editor made it seem sort of closer to the dream. And then Queen Latifah, who I ended up interviewing for Essence after my
Mhm.
interviews, and she said, "Are you a musician?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was really the first star that took an interest, in my musicality and asked me to submit her some songs I was writing. And then she ended up asking me to co-write a song with her called Winky's Theme. And
Mm.
that ended up being the first gold album that I ever worked on. That's this gold record right here.
Wow.
So that's sort of where it began. So while I was at Essence in the 90s, I worked there from 1990 to 1997,
Mhm.
were when some of those 90s hits that you talked about came out while I was still at work. So, Brownstone's If You Love Me hit the chart, Anita Baker's, and was nominated for a Grammy. I Apologize, that I co-wrote with Anita Baker and Barry Eastman, who I know you've had on the show. That
Yes.
hit the R&B charts while I was at Essence. That was nominated for a Grammy and won a Grammy. And then Missing You, which I also wrote with Barry for the film Set It Off, recorded by Brandy, Tamia, Gladys Knight, Chaka Khan. That was
Mhm.
nominated for a Grammy. So all of that activity was actually while I was still working during the day at Essence. And my job was, at Essence, it wasn't just a day job. As entertainment editor, I had to go to a lot of functions at night and hobnob with, the entertainment industry, but, more on the side of, artists that would be a good fit for being in the magazine or performing for the Essence Music Festival. But it was all sort of connected and networking. It wasn't the same departments of the record companies I would have to deal with about stories, but it was still, people know each other. It was a good sort
Right.
of place to be, to just sort of be in the mix and sort of make a name and a brand for myself. So
Mhm.
eventually I left in 1997. And while I was at Essence, I had a publishing deal with Prince's publishing company called Paisley Park, which was a co-venture with Warner Chappell. When I
Okay.
left Essence, my publishing deal had ended shortly right before I left. And I bumped into L.A. Reid one day, who also I knew from Essence because Toni Braxton had been on the cover. I wrote a cover story about Toni Braxton for Essence. So
Right.
I've dealt with L.A. Reid, while I was at Essence. I bumped into him one day. He said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, you left. I left Essence." He said, "You left Essence? Wow." He said, "And what are you doing? What's going on with your writing? What's going on with your publisher?" I said, "Actually, my publishing deal just ended." He said, "Well, wow, it's good timing. I'm starting a new publishing company called Hitco, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about joining us.
Mhm.
And so I ended up signing a publishing deal with L.A. Reid's company Hitco not very long after leaving in Essence in 1997, and then started writing on projects for LaFace, but many labels.
Right.
No More Rain, written by what I wrote, No More Rain with Angie Stone, was done while I was at Hitco. But then while I was at Hitco Publishing, L.A. Reid got promoted to being president of Arista Records.
Right.
And when he was at Arista Records, two of the projects he worked on were Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston. So he ended up hiring me to produce on two of those projects.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he left there, then he went to become vice president or senior, I don't know the title, president, I can't remember the title of he ended up getting promoted to the title of president of Def Jam Records. And so while he was at Def Jam, I ended up working with him on the Isley Brothers records and Patti LaBelle's records. So that was kind of like the secondary chapter of my songwriting career post Essence.
Okay. So we did talk a little bit about your career at Essence, and how you started the songwriting and everything. But I just want to go back for a minute and talk about some of these songs, because these are important.
Sure.
I believe in honoring people like you and Barry Eastman, who I had on, your writing partner, and a lot of others, because I believe that we should, celebrate our own. We should know you guys' name just like we know the Diane Warrens and, David Foster's, all these great producers and writers and whatever they might be. We should honor our own, and I believe that. But I Apologize is one of my favorite songs ever in the history of music, period. Like no specific genre. It's one of my favorite songs, period. And I told Barry the same thing. I Apologize is like perfect in my eyes. I don't think there's anything that can be fixed on that song at all. Like that's it. It's over with. And that song was very big for Anita. What I love too, let me just say this, is that not many artists were able to come out of the 80s and go into the 90s and still have success at that level. But Anita Baker did. And then, even with that song alone, she still had Grammy, nominations and wins. So I thought that was something awesome for you guys to collaborate on and it be a hit. But that song was just perfect. For you, when you heard the song, what did you first think?
Well, I heard Barry and Anita sort of started this like vibing session where Barry had this chord scheme where he was rapping around the piano. She was just singing, I apologize, and humming like the feeling of the atmosphere of where it could go. But it was very skeletal. It didn't have any lyrics or any storyline around it, but I could tell the energy and the mood she wanted to create from this little rough tape where they were just kind of vibing on the piano. And the title, it was her concept. So Barry sort of fleshed it out. He let me hear that idea, and then he fleshed it out, made a track of it. And he said this was something that Anita and I started messing around in the studio, like when we basically were almost finished with the album. But I think that this is really has something magical about it. Do you think you can write this and demo this right away? He said, because she's coming to New York to master the album this weekend, but I just have a sensation about this idea, but we got to turn this around. So this was when I had first met Barry very early in our relationship via Phyllis Hyman. But, I had known he was working on that album. And of course I was like, Anita Baker was one of my favorite artists. I used to write my term papers to Anita Baker's music class at Brown University. That same friend, Scott, that helped me get the internship at the Village Vanguard. Anita Baker's Giving You the Best album came out, and we literally cut class because we walked to all these record stores in Providence to find that album. So that's how much of an Anita Baker fan I was. So when he asked me to take a stab at writing this lyric for this, I jumped on it.
Oh yeah. And
I had to drive up after work, pretend to be feeling not well that day. Look at me, a big old black man. I'm not feeling well. It was, whatever. So my quote unquote not feeling well self hightailed up to Barry's studio, which was about a 40-minute drive, cut the vocals, laid the song down, and then he had to rush it to FedEx because this was way before MP3s. He had to rush it to FedEx it to her because he wanted her to listen to it on the plane. Barry had a vision of this. So she listened to it on the plane and she loved it. And so when he went to master the album with her, he had a feeling that mastering was going to take 2 days, as it ordinarily does. And right. Anita's a very, hands-on, kind of creative. He had a feeling that, she would want to take a second day to master to her specification and her perfection. Mm-hmm. And while they were mastering, he said, Anita, listen, that I apologize idea. He said, we have some extra time left from one of the other unfinished sessions. You want to just lay down a scratch vocal of it and we'll just keep this in the vault for the next album, quote unquote.
Okay.
Well, after she sang the heaven into it, he told the engineer, he said, listen, go ahead and just do a mix of that. And then the next day when they were doing mastering, he said, Anita, listen, I need you to hear something. And he played her, I apologize. And she thought, the scratch vocal. He said, no, that was not a scratch vocal, Anita. That was a knockout vocal. And this sounds like a hit song for this album. And she said, do you think so? And he said, yes. But the record company who'd been listening to the demos of it, the unmastered versions, the mixes but not mastered, right, had not heard of it. So it was turned into the record company. And then they just freaked out. They're like, wow, this is a new song we'd never heard. This is radio friendly. It had a different groove than the rest of the album because the Rhythm of Love was very jazzy, but right, this had a more definitive, a little bit of a head bop to it, mm-hmm, a little bit of a different kind of groove for Anita, a gritty, somewhat almost a little slightly grittier groove. Right. Still very jazzy, very elegant, but slightly just something was different about it. Had a little head bop to it, mm-hmm. And it seemed to just be ear candy to the radio promotion people at the label. Sylvia Rhone heard it and got behind it and said, listen, we need to put this on the radio immediately. And they sent it to radio and immediately started getting all these spins. And then they ended up rushing the album. The album came out even ahead of schedule. And the song just started playing and playing and playing. And the rest was Grammy-winning history.
Wow.
So for me, it was really full circle to find myself 4 years out of college, or 3 years out of college, working in the studio with these two living legends, people whose music I had listened to all through the 80s in my formative years, when I was in high school bands and as just dreaming about being in music and just, singing their songs and, singing songs that either of them had probably worked in talent shows in high school to then finally find myself, in being on a project with two legends, because Barry Eastman is a legend. And I'm so glad that you interviewed him. And he's been such a pivotal role model in my life, not just the songs that we've done and him taking a chance on collaborating with me as basically an unknown writer at the time, but also he just as a person, there's an elegance and a dignity and a calm. He's just laid back, but calm, but very professional, knows what he's doing. And I like the way I remember the first time I went to his house, I said, I like this man. It was bigger than music. I liked him as a person. I liked his wife. I liked his kids. Right, it seemed like he just seemed humble, but very, his family reminded me of my family. Mm-hmm. Something felt at home. And he became a role model to me about not just about music, but how you can live your life and be in the music business and keep what's really important to you, the values that really matter to you most.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That's important. That's important. And
it is.
One thing, I'm glad that you said that, because that is something just for me speaking to him through Zoom, I could pick up, his spirit, his being, I could pick up that same kind of thing. And it was very, refreshing. Somebody of his caliber just be that humble and, cool and collected. He didn't have a chip on his shoulder or anything like that. So I could almost imagine exactly what you're talking about. So I thank you for that. But yes, I love that, you guys were able to get together because, it created some of the best things in the world. But yes, I love that song. And speaking of Anita Baker, matter of fact, people will watch this. I just seen earlier, about 2 hours ago on Twitter that she confirmed she is getting her masters back. I know that she told people to stop
Wow, so that just
streaming.
happened.
Yeah, she told people to stop streaming previously because they were holding her masters, and she just announced about 2 hours ago. So she said they are coming home, and we have the green light to start streaming again. So that's a bit of good news for this Friday.
Wow, and it's wild that we're doing this interview at this particular time.
Yeah.
Well, good for her. I mean, that's a good fight that she's won, and that's great. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm
absolutely.
Sure that will
absolutely
encourage many other artists to fight that good fight.
Yeah, especially an artist of her, caliber. You worked so hard for so many years.
And Anita was, very pivotal. Like, those 2 solo albums that she wrote, that she did on Beverly Glen. Was it 2 solo albums or just one? No, there was a songstress. She was in the band chapter. She did the songstress. From what I read about, her career, I never really discussed this with her, but she had, not been treated fairly in those early years. So when she got approached years later by Bob Krasnow to come to Elektra, she was very clear, like, I'll do this with you, but I want to have creative control. And she was always her own executive producer. So she was able to pick her songs, and, she's always written songs and co-written songs on all of her projects, and picked her producer, because that was very rare in those days. It was like, okay, you're an R&B singer, you're attractive, blah, blah, blah. We're going to put you with the latest, hottest producer at the time. But, for Rapture, she chose Michael Powell, who was her former bandmate. So she's always been very pivotal in calling shots in her own creativity. So it's apropos that she would own her own masters and be able to chart her own destiny from here on out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nita.
But what, her vision in her mind was, it turned out to be true because the things that she put in those albums really stuck. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't something that you just say like, okay, I'll just play this. And you was like, okay, that's cool. This was something in any album, really. I don't even have to name one. You can just put on, and you can, think about a moment where you were when you first heard that song, or, anything, or a special time or a special moment in your life when you heard these songs. Or you can just put them on and you're like, you know what, this is a groove, this is a vibe, this is, everything. You know what I'm saying? And that's any album that she's done. So you can tell that what she believed, when she believed in herself, and when she put that vision into place, it made sense. And I don't think there's any denying that, anywhere around. A lot of us didn't even want her to retire. They were still like, please, no, just do another show. Just come back. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm happy for that. So that is a bit of good news for today. For all of us. So I can stream those albums later on in the day when I'm relaxed. But I want to talk about the other song that you mentioned, Brownstone. Brownstone gets slept on, in my opinion, especially out of girl groups. There was so many in the 90s that it was almost hard to keep track of them. And it was something that got lost, matter of fact, because they only had like one single, one album, and then it was done. But Brownstone had success. They maintained success. With your help, they had one of the biggest songs to date, matter of fact, with If You Love Me. I don't think anybody doesn't know that song, matter of fact. And then it's been sampled again, as of recently, with Tory Lanez making it, big again. So when you see that,
actually, I mean, Tory Lanez's version actually ended up being bigger.
Wow.
Because it ended up, just reaching on many, many different charts. So, I mean, Tory Lanez's "Say It" is I think it's a triple platinum single. I think the last time I checked, I mean, Say It, Tory Lanez's version is the biggest. That's the biggest hit song I've been associated with. So it's a triple platinum. I believe, I have to check. It was a triple platinum single.
Okay.
So it's amazing. Just what you talked about earlier about Anita. Timelessness of music, and how Tory Lanez, who I'm yet to meet. Of all the millions of songs in the world, would be enamored with this Brownstone song and sample it and flip it and want to do another version of it, and then that version becomes a big hit. It was a shock to me.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing though, after all these many years, because that was in what, 95, somewhere around there?
Brownstone, yeah, that was probably playing on the radio in 94, because it was nominated for the Grammy in the 1995 Grammy. So
Right,
90,
right.
maybe, yeah, 94, maybe late 90, no, 94. Yep.
Okay, okay. But yeah, all these years later, you know, he took and used that and it became so much bigger. Just really shows the test of music. You know what I'm saying? It shows
Amen.
the what music can do, for number one, and two, it shows how good the song was. Because if it wasn't any good, nobody would remember it. But even listening to Tory's, you know, version, that's what you remember. That say, do it, you know, you remember that. So that just speaks to, you know, how good the production was, the writing was, you know, the music, all of that stuff was in a song. So, you know, thank you for that. How did you end up writing on that song?
That song was also connected to Phyllis Hyman, because I mean, Phyllis has been my angel in my career. May she rest in peace. But there was a producer who now lives in Atlanta, Dave Hall, who was part of the Untouchables production company, huge in the 90s. Dave Hall did, and Dave has never been very much to be one in the spotlight. I've never seen him give an interview ever. He's always been very off the grid. Never was, you know, that type to promote himself that way, really. But totally huge contribution to 90s R&B. Dave, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, sorry. Dave produced half of Mary J. Blige's debut album.
Okay.
He produced Dream Lover for Mariah Carey.
Yes, yes.
You know, I mean, huge intro.
Oh yes.
You know, a lot of intros hits was let me be the one you come running to. And Kenny Green, who was the lead singer of Intro, was Dave Hall's writing partner. They wrote Love Without a Limit.
Right.
You know, You Remind Me. I mean, you know, major hits for Mary that Dave Hall and Kenny wrote. So I met Dave through some people that worked for Untouchables Publishing Company. And Dave was looking for more writers to collaborate with. Okay. And so I went to have a meeting with him, played him some of my stuff. And he was very quiet, but he listened very intently. And, you know, and he was like, can you come back tomorrow? I'm going to have a female artist here. I'm like, okay. I didn't know who the artist was going to be. I'm like, maybe some upcoming somebody. And it was Phyllis Hyman. I was like, oh my God, Phyllis is just thrown on the spot. So we ended up working on some songs for Phyllis. And then Phyllis liked my style. And then she's the one who took me to Barry Eastman's house for the first time. Okay. But in that time, that Phyllis was the first project that Dave and I were working together. Dave also liked me, you know, just my writing style, and had me just, you know, starting to write to different tracks. And we wrote lots and lots of songs, the thing about songwriters' careers is like, you know, for as many quote unquote hits as we have a whole lot of flops too.
That's right.
So we have, you know, I heard Kenny Gamble give an interview about that, you know, recently one day about, you know, he said like, you know, if you got a Teddy Pendergrass album and you like 8 of the songs, we might have written 80, you know,
exactly,
that didn't make the album. So Dave and I wrote many songs for people. We wrote If the Mood Is Right for Jade. We wrote together for Usher's first album called The Final Goodbye. We wrote on a lot of projects. But If You Love Me just was this song that we were submitting to Jade that they passed on. But then the song got sent to Brownstone, which was signed to MJJ Records. At the time, Michael Jackson was in a lot of legal trouble. So I was like, oh my goodness, is this record ever going to come out? You know, who the hell knows? I was really excited about Jade, but that didn't happen. And sure enough, Brownstone, I got Brownstone's demo because they did their own demo. They added, Nikki wrote the she wrote that part to the song and put that on the demo. And I remember hearing them demo when they first did it. And I was like, what? It sounded so different to me than Dave and I's version. Because I sang it more kind of laid back, more calm. And they came back hollering, you know, and then they added this part, the OI part, which I liked it, but I'm like, does it go with the rest of the song?
Right.
And then the original demo, the way I wrote it was, if you love me, show it.
Okay.
And then Nikki changed it to the say it. And I remember Nikki, I said, well, you know, why did you change it? She said, because Gordon, I'm a woman and women need to hear our men say it. You know, we need to hear it. And so she and I had a bit of a debate about that. But, you know, her instincts were right, you know, about the say it coming first, you know, and also just the bridge that she added. I mean, listen, when we sing that song, I mean, I sing it at open mics, you know, especially at open mics, you know, when you get into, you have the right background singers and whoever it is starts to harmonizing on that. I mean, you get the right section.
That's
right. It's like church, you know.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I mean, we've had full out church, you know, at open mics in New York. Still, I mean, this day I'm talking about like months ago. This summer, you know, 22 years later, to If You Love Me, it's become not just a hip hop hit, but it's become like really an underground. Village Underground, which was a place in New York where there's a legendary open mic, but that all the singers know. That was a classic song. Melanie Daniels would sing it. You know, I would sing it, but you know, other singers would just sing it. To this day, it's an open mic classic. So that was the kind of the story of If You Love Me. And then I also ended up writing with Nikki Half of You, which was on the album. That was a duet that she and I wrote and sang together. And then I ended up working on another song on the second album called In the Game of Love.
Wow, that's crazy though. But you know, you were right about the church, because the way that they harmonized on it really takes you there. That, and if you care, you gotta show it, baby. You know that part, and they just take it out.
I mean, you know, it's like, and because I do it in my shows too. You know, I do it in my concerts sometimes, and I mean, I have made whoever singing background for me. I'm like, come on now.
Listen, you gotta be ready.
You better you know, don't be half stepping with that bridge of that song.
Yeah, you gotta be ready.
You got to be ready. It's a fun song to sing. It's interesting because during the pandemic, I started listening to a lot of Labelle. You know, not Patti Labelle, but Labelle.
The group,
the group Labelle. And a lot of Nona Hendrix's writing, you know, I just started getting captivated by Labelle, the group that they were, the voices, and Nona as a writer.
Yes.
And I was thinking a lot, I'm like, wow, no group had that sound that Labelle had. And I was like, Brownstone was the closest thing to that thickness, but thick, but still pretty, and tones, the way that, I don't know, they're the only ones that, and it's not the same as Labelle, but that three women that could just sing and harmonize.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, but sing like with power, you know?
Right. We were talking about Labelle and their voices, and something I wanted to echo and agree with you on, matter of fact. I interviewed Sarah Dash, matter of fact, a couple of years ago, and she had me listen to this song, Wild Horses, that Labelle did. And she said, have you ever listened to this song? And I said, no. She said, listen to it. I said, okay. I was in an interview, I want to listen to that song. And I just, you know, mellowed in it. And I was like, wow. Like, this is what true vocal ability is about. True vocals. You know what I'm saying? That's what it's about. You didn't need a whole lot. It wasn't, you know, amped up with all this, you know, technology and all this other stuff. It was just pure. And it was like, wow, okay. So I have loved Labelle before then, but I fell in love with Labelle after that, definitely. So yeah, Labelle is definitely top tier when it comes to girl groups and vocals, not only girl groups. But it's funny that you mentioned Jade earlier too. I was just thinking about them, matter of fact. I was listening to one of their songs last night when I was listening to the songs that you wrote, which was One Woman that I was listening to. And it's crazy that they would pass on the song If You Love Me. But I think it worked out for the best though, because Brownstone really delivered.
Right. Yes, it did.
Yeah. Of course, Missing You was a big song with Brandy, Tamia, Gladys Knight, and Chaka Khan. Set It Off
Yes.
was a big movie, period. But the soundtrack and that song really took off. That song in particular took off, and people still sing that song today, matter of fact. Especially if they lost someone. That's a no-brainer. Just like I'll Be Missing You with Faith Evans and 112 and Puff Daddy. Those songs are synonymous with somebody losing someone, you know. So that was very much a big deal. But you not only work with Brandy on there, you work with her outside of there too on Never Say Never with the song One Voice.
Yes.
Which a song you said is one of your favorite songs, and you said when you heard her sing it, you came to tears.
I did.
What was it about that song that was like touching you so much?
You know, well, that song, Phil Galston, who's also a good friend of Barry Eastman's.
Yes.
And Barry and Phil and I have written together. As a matter of fact, the three of us wrote Someone Watching Over Me for Yolanda Adams.
Yes.
But Phil and I wrote One Voice together. And we were pitching it to Celine Dion, and Phil had written a lot of songs for Celine. So he was very shocked that Celine passed, but he was like, this is a great song, I'm not gonna give up. And he pitched it to Craig Coleman, the president of Atlantic, who I also went to college with, actually.
Wow.
And called me and said, Gordon, you know, Craig wants Brandy to do One Voice. I was like, really? And I, you know, Brandy being such a young artist, One Voice is a very sophisticated kind of song, the way it's just written, and the, you know, I just was surprised that Brandy was interested in that song. I just thought that, you know, for her second album, she would have been, you know, doing these more youthful. But I love Brandy. I think Brandy's a great singer. I was just very surprised.
Right.
And he said, and David Foster's going to produce it. I was like, wow. But then that was also funny because David Foster had produced a lot of Celine Dion's, you know, music. Right. I would be like, this is very interesting. It would have been maybe great if David was producing for Celine. Right. But, you know, but let's see, you know, listen, in business, when you get a cover, you're happy about it. So, you know, Phil and I were not involved with the production. David, you know, did his own thing. So when I finally got to hear it, it moved me to tears. The innocence of Brandy's tone, singing that big message, and the hope of her young, innocent, almost like childlike voice, singing about peace and unity and, you know, world togetherness from the innocent. It's like, you know, the innocence of a child. Yeah. And it was almost like, it was deeply moving, and David Foster's production was so big but cool at the same time. Yeah. And the background vocals and the choir and the way he mixed Brandy's vocals, where you can hear that the choir is really full, but he kind of mixed it in a certain way that she's still on top of it. It's like he had her ad-libs coming in and out of the way he was dancing with sonics. Right. And and you can hear BB Winans' voice because he was in the choir and he has that step out, deep division. It just was moving. Two recordings that I heard that moved me to tears when I first heard the vocals was that, and when I heard Marc Anthony's How Could I, which was a ballad that I wrote for his album with Corey Rooney. When I heard How Could I, it just moved me to tears because Marc is such a deeply emotional singer. Yes. So, you know, and because a lot of my hit songs, I've been a part of the production, but, you know, these were two vocal performances that I was not there in the studio. I wasn't involved with the production. So it was just just got the goosebumps just like a, you know, music fan would just upon hearing it. So, and One Voice has also, you know, stood the test of time. I mean, many choirs sing it in services and choir competitions, and you know, it has lived the test of time, and of course Never Say Never went on to become one of the biggest albums of the 90s, one of the biggest selling albums of the 90s in the R&B period. You know, so it was funny because I wrote that song with Phil the night that my boss at Essence, Susan Taylor, and I had a conversation about my leaving. You know, that was the day that we had this conversation about it was time for me to go, you know, from Essence. So it was a very emotional night that we wrote the song, and it ended up being the biggest album that I've been a part of to date as an album. So
Yes, yes. And Brandy really embodied what the 90s was, I would say.
Yeah.
And
You know
today,
what?
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
Brandy has made me so proud, having been a part and met her, as a young girl and seen her grow into a woman and a mother and an actress. It's been phenomenal just to, watch her grow and develop.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just, her voice, a lot of people today, matter of fact, call her the vocal Bible.
Yes.
I think that's an honor, way above our heads. I think it's fitting for her, don't get me wrong. So I'm glad that they gave her that, but that's so high. You know what I'm saying? Somebody to call you the vocal Bible means a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta have some kind of something that's not ordinary, So she does fit that. And the thing about Brandy is she, like I said, embodies the 90s. She is the 90s, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From being Moesha to and even before Moesha, she was on Thea, and her albums and songs really took over the 90s. But when she blossomed into a woman, that just made it even more, and Never Say Never really took off. So I was glad, to see your name in the mix on that. I even saw you, pay tribute to her a few years ago, matter of fact.
Yes.
In Puerto Rico, I think it was.
Yes.
And you sang that song for her.
I
So
did.
what was that like for you to turn around and sing your song?
Well, it was intimidating because she is the vocal Bible. I was honored to be there and honored that they asked me to do that for her. And I love her, but when it came time to sing, I mean, I'm a singer and I've had, I've released 4 solo albums. I've had many entertainers come to see me perform. I mean, I've performed and Patti LaBelle has been in the audience and, Carl Thomas and, many, many artists that I've been on bills with.
Right.
And also our colleagues who've been just to come to see the shows. That has happened many times. And in my career, even before I was on any records as a songwriter, when I was doing my shows, artists that I knew invited them and they came. So that was nothing new. But this was the first time ever in my career that I was singing a song for somebody and it was their song, because as a songwriter, once you write it, once the artist records it, it's really theirs. It's like you kind of surrender it to them. So it was kind of like I'm singing it for Brandy and I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope I hit the notes right. And it's in it was in a high key.
Yeah.
And I was like, are people going to be there comparing me to her? Are they going to wish that she sang it? They were like, Gordon, just give her the mic. It's so funny because somebody in YouTube in the comments was like, I don't know why he didn't just pass the mic to her, but she wasn't there to sing. She was there to be honored. And
right.
And she was moved. She, you can see in the camera that she was very moved.
Yeah, she was
honored.
She was.
And that was very genuine. And I could tell that, that I moved her.
Yeah.
My presence, that she was moved. She was moved to be honored that night, period. And I think that she didn't know it was going to be me. And I think she was very, 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 very moved. I could tell that. And, and so, people in YouTube comments are going to say whatever they're going to say. But I was there. The room was there. We were there. And it was a magical moment. And it's one I'll never forget.
Yeah. You could tell she really got into the moment. And I think beyond what other people say or outside people say, it's something very magical to be in the presence of somebody singing a song, especially something like that. It's one thing to listen to a song on record, but it's something totally different to listen to it live and it be good, So to watch her be in the moment, you could tell she was really going somewhere inside of herself and somewhere special.
I think so.
I don't.
And who knows? She might have wanted to sing. Maybe
exactly.
I said, girl, you want to come up and sing with? But I was singing it to track also, and I didn't know if she knew that arrangement and blah blah blah. If there was a band, I probably would have been, because I'm not afraid to have somebody sing to come up to the stage. But it was a track date. It wasn't a band date,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I seen her get out of her chair a little bit one time, and then she sat back down like, no, I'm not going to do it.
I think she was moved.
She was moved. She was.
And she did sing that night afterwards. She did also perform Have You Ever that night in that same thing. which I don't know if that's probably didn't probably go as viral as the tribute did, but she also did sing that night too. So I don't want to take her out of her comfort because it wasn't her, it was my arrangement, it wasn't her arrangement. It's, blah, blah, blah. But I was happy to be there and honored to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad that you were able to pull it off and not let the nerves and the thoughts consume you.
I was nervous though. I was nervous, but God delivered and we had a moment.
Yes, thankfully, because it's not often that you see songwriters sing a song to an artist that has done it.
Right. You may see a song like Ashford and Simpson, who of course wrote "You're All I Need to Get By." They would do it in their shows, for years, to sing the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But it's very rare to see the songwriter tribute the artist who sang that song. That's right. Usually if they have Brandy tributes, you might see Monica singing a Brandy song, but it is rare to see the songwriter who wrote it sing it for the artist who recorded it. That is rare. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's something special in that, though, I think. Because you have to come from a special place when you write especially a song like that, because that was a little bit different. It was a little more spiritual.
Very spiritual.
It wasn't more so just a love song. It was really a giving myself coming song. It was that kind
and
of
she
thing.
she said something in her acceptance speech that was very powerful. Right after this, she said, there were times in my life when I didn't feel like I belonged, at events like this but she said, but tonight I really do feel worthy to be honored. I feel worthy. There were times in which I didn't feel worthy. And I knew that the song had done something to her soul, because she accepted the award right after I sang it. I presented it to her.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, it's amazing to be able to convey a song in that way and somebody be touched, But like I said, she seemed very moved by it. I don't believe that you can fake something like that. So I know that it had to be real. For you to fake something, most of the time somebody can tell, but I don't believe that was fake at all. I believe she's very moved and in the moment, because it does that to you, So if Yolanda Adams saying anything right now today in front of me, I'm just going in a corner and I'm just, crying. So it is what it is.
I agree.
But I just wanted to talk about somebody that we all love. One of the greatest voices that ever lived, of course, Whitney Houston. And you have worked with her numerous times. And I recently, matter of fact, seen you in the documentary that ABC did for her.
Yes.
And you said crowns are heavy. She was given a crown at a very early age. When did you know that Whitney was special? At what point did you know that?
It's interesting. Because they used quite a bit of my clips for that interview, but I mean, they must have interviewed me for about 3.5 hours to use the clips that they used. Yeah. I mean, television, you edit and you edit and you edit and you edit. I was honored. I was honored that I made the edit and that they even included so much of what I had to say. And then they used that line as the promotional line for the whole series. So, that line seemed to have really stuck with people. I remember hearing Whitney's voice. First of all, I remember, I'm from New York, so Sissy would perform at clubs and nightclubs and do showcases. So there was a buzz that Sissy had this daughter that could really sing.
Yeah.
Because I had seen Sissy show. I had opened up for Sissy once when I was in 18 or 19, actually.
Oh, nice.
But I had never heard Whitney. But I remember before Whitney's big hits came out, there were certain songs that played on the radio. There was Thinking About You. Like, I remember that one used to play on WBLS way before they were even playing You Good Love. There was a Kashif song called Are You the Woman? Are you the woman? The woman, are you the woman? And she sang backgrounds on it. And I think, if I recall, these are things that came out before her album came out. So I remember that her voice, there was a buzz about her, and hearing the sound of her voice, and it was just this clear, strong soprano. I mean, Whitney's voice, I think it hit home, especially for Black people, because it was a voice that we all recognize as that church girl that she's that soprano who's not afraid, that natural soprano.
That's right.
that can hit the notes, like, oh, she got that note. So it was a familiar sound, but it was very refined.
Mm-hmm.
So there was something familiar about it, like a voice that we all heard that would remind us of the soprano in our choir,
Right.
but also, but a very refined version of that voice.
Yeah.
And once we saw her, I mean, she was so stunningly beautiful.
Right.
It was one thing to have that angelic sound, but then to also look like an angel.
Mm-hmm.
And then also she was brown. She was not light skinned. She was a chocolate girl. She was a brown girl. It was just cherub-like. It was just angelic.
Yeah.
And, she rose so quickly to the charts. I mean, she just catapulted quick. Well, it seemed quick. It really wasn't that quick because they actually played You Good Love, Good Love on the radio for quite a long time before they segued to Saving All My Love for You. But it seemed like she was just as unknown. It seemed fast, but actually it was a process.
Yeah.
But then, she became like American royalty, before our very eyes. And I just remember being very, very, very proud of her. Right. And thinking one day, I want to know her. I want, even beyond work with her, I'm like, I want to know her. She just seemed cool to know, and she's from Jersey and I'm from Jersey. She's from 25 minutes away from where I was from and, maybe 5 years older than me. And dreams did come true. I ended up writing 2 songs for her, My Love and One Wish, and sang background for Things You Say, but also just went to many parties at her family's homes and going to the Clive Davis Grammy party, and just actually spending a good amount, I wouldn't say a lot, but a good amount of quality time with her over the years. And whenever we got together, it was always really real. Right. It was real conversation. We prayed together. Mm-hmm. She did not give me the celebrity version of herself. I got to know her and she got to know me. Right. And I loved her. She was a beautiful human being. CeCe Winans just did a really beautiful tribute to her on her YouTube channel that aired earlier this week. So, you should check that out. And people watching that I think would really very much enjoy the CeCe Winans interview. And she also had Gary and Pat Houston as her guests as well. And they got to share some of their memories as well. And it was a very beautiful tribute and beautiful interview that aired this week as well.
Yes. So I definitely got to check that out. But I thank, God for Whitney, for letting us borrow her, because I think if anybody or any of us had thought about it, we would have known that she really was just an angel, coming to visit for a little while. People like that don't stay long. And it's crazy. Oprah even called Whitney the voice. And Whitney said, wow, that's a lot. But she, wore that well. She wore that very well. And she did things no other person could even do. And she took what her mother gave her and not only used that, but build upon that, which I love. And I love these documentaries sometimes. Just because I want people to see the real Whitney, because me as a person can see that Whitney was not the person that was just in front of the camera all the time, but she was somebody that was laid back, cool, wanted to have fun, not necessarily the person that was, in front of the camera. But I'm glad that people are starting to see the real Whitney because, the 2000s were not very kind to her all the time, which I don't really like. But no matter what, you can't take away the voice. You can't take away those records. And thankful, to you and people like Narada Michael Walden, who worked extensively with her in producing hits too. Clive Davis, matter of fact, who she was, under his wing the entire time, pretty much at Arista. So I'm thankful for that. And thank you for being on the documentary, because it was good to see a familiar face.
Thank you.
As well as the other folks. But one other person I want to talk about too, before we talk about your solo stuff, if we don't get time right now, we can talk about solo stuff when we come back. But one other person that I want to talk about too was Phyllis Hyman. You made mention of her a couple of times, but you even dedicated a song on one of your albums to her. And you talked a little bit about, how she had helped you, but tell me how you even became intertwined with her. And what was that relationship like for you up until her passing? Because I'm sure you knew her up until then.
Yes, I spoke to her a couple of days before she passed, actually. Phyllis was larger than life. I mean, at the time I met her, she was large, she was tall, and she had put on some weight. So she was really intimidating as a presence, but loving, you know. I met her on a songwriting session with Dave Hall. It was a surprise. He said, there's gonna be a female artist here, and then the artist was her. And he put me on the spot to start writing a hook for one of the songs that was released after she passed. And she was like taken with me, like that I could write and I could write quickly. And then she was the one who introduced me to Barry Eastman. So she changed my life completely. But Phyllis was fun. She was loud. She was very outspoken. If she was mad, she would cuss you out or cuss whoever's out in her presence. But she was a very sensitive person. She wore her heart on her sleeve.
Yes.
Very sensitive soul. At the time, she was really concerned about, her career, and, she had been working on this album, the album that we worked on for years, and the record company kept not, making her go back to record more and more and more. And she was very frustrated. I did not know she was suicidal. That was a complete shock.
Wow.
But I know that I could feel that she was frustrated. But as I look back on her life, there was also, I believe that she did believe that I had the talent to be in the business for a long time. And that I believe that she wanted to pour into me lessons. And I used to go to her apartment and visit all the time. She would feed me. She was like an auntie to me. She came to some gigs I performed at and, asked me a million questions on who is this and why are you doing this and how long, like a stage auntie, but she came very supportive. She introduced me to many people. She said, oh, you need to know this man. Just people. I mean, I remember going to the Shark Bar with her and Denzel watched. She said, Denzel, have you met Gordon James? I mean, she's bringing me over so that Denzel can meet me.
Wow.
But she took interest in me and love for me in a very amazing way. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And, recently there was a box set that was released. And through Instagram, of course, there's a lot of Instagram tributes that show a lot of footage of hers, and very amazing presence, amazing performer, amazing singer. She could sing in the studio like one take, one or two takes, perfect pitch. I mean, amazing. She was a completely naturally talented, gifted singer, performer, song interpreter, legend. Legendary.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I even remember seeing an interview, I think she did with Donnie Simpson back in the day, and she talked about how frustrated she was with just seeing artists who had little to no talent come up and, make it so big. And here she is singing her heart out, and her records weren't doing what they needed to do. But I always felt like Phyllis Hyman was underrated. Listening to all those albums now, you can hear a lot of the sorrow and pain, that she might have been going through during those times, but you hear the raw talent too. And that's something that I loved about her, because she really, you can see, left it on record. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You didn't feel like she was faking it. Whatever song she was singing, you really believe that, especially those ballads. But, she was definitely going too soon, but I'm glad to, know that somebody, has been touched by her life, like a lot of us. But you got to study under her and be around her and tribute her. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's always, good to see somebody not being forgotten. And what a beautiful way, because I think it was a song for you that you did, matter of fact, Donny Hathaway. So that was very befitting, I think.
Thank you.
But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Yeah, it's 5:50. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and then, I'll let you get some juice, and then we can come back whenever we both agree on and finish it up, okay?
Okay, brother. All right. So
Oh,
email me some potential times for a part 2,
okay.
and we'll knock out part 2.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much again. I appreciate you.